and bans for game number 1 actually coming up here shortly. And with Bolts being in that first pick position, like you just highlighted, it should be interesting because if they choose to try and prioritize the Artemis for Barracuda, then I would imagine that some combination of Tiamat and Odin certainly can't be allowed to go through because they'd be such strong response picks for the Jade Dragons.
And the other interesting thing is you have to start accounting for the fact that you can't let Sam get Mercury. Like, that's just been a thing. Like, again, one of the only junglers who's playing it, one of the only teams that has been locking it in. Granted, they were doing it a lot more specifically against Chiron, but I feel like he's going to be pretty well spirited against some of the other junglers that are available. So I'm interested to see if the Dragons are either going to pick up a Mercury if he's let through, or if the Bolts have to ban it because of how prominent it's been for the Dragons.
Seems as though mid lane priority bans are what are reigning true here for the Jade Dragons. Morgan and Tiamat not going to make it into Venenu's hands this go round, and an Artemis ban from the Bolts, even though they are in that first pick position and could have taken it for themselves, showcasing that they don't really feel all that confident wanting to take that Artemis given the threat that FineOK has proven himself to be with the likes of an Odin.
I'm wondering if that's something that you could give yourself a little bit of credit for. Like, you put it into Barra's mind of, oh, wait, yeah, I really don't want to play against his Artemis. He knows it. But it does open up a lot of things. Again, we saw, the highlights, Danzaburo, Artemis, so that's 2 shots immediately at Panda Cat. And then you just have to think of matchups. Like, what has he been locking in other than that? Chiron a few times. Again, no necessarily like Xbalanques like Barra's been playing. So there's a lot more flexibility, I think, for the Bolts right now than where the Dragons are.
But again, this all kind of comes back to that same discussion of both of these teams tend to kind of circulate a lot of similarities as far as their drafts are concerned. Amir, Yamoja, Fafnir.
Oh, jeez.
The prime time of the support front line. Completely up for grabs here for both of these teams. Wouldn't even be surprised to potentially see the likes of a Kabrakan starting to shine through maybe here for the Jade Dragons, but mobility seems to be the Jade Dragons' primary focus here as they'll take Giannis for Hurrywin, and there's the Yamoja takeaway from Awesome Jake. Polar Bear Mike, I think, has definitely showed himself to be a formidable opponent whenever he gets this water goddess on his side, so I like the mobility already from the Jade Dragons. I think that there's a ton of cutoff potential as well in teamfight engagements just between that through space and time and River's Rebuke.
He's 7 for 7 on these Giannis games this year. Hurrywin has not been getting this pick a lot, and granted, he kind of got nerfed pretty heavily. There were a lot of discussions about whether or not he was still going to be very prominent. It was somebody that was getting first banned against pretty much every single team. Nobody wanted to play against the Giannis, and then he dropped to the point where nobody was picking him anymore. But we saw it, granted, maybe with a grain of salt. What was that, yesterday, where he said, like, look, if y'all saw that build from ahead, you'd be really worried about it. It was there's some discussion about whether or not it was
the no pen
solid.
build, the no pen Giannis trademark there from Hurrywin. But hey, the guy's so talented, he finds a way to make it work regardless. And if a win's a win, Gore, at the end of the day. And although I will say, I don't expect that to be the case here for Hurrywin here today. I think up against the likes of the Bolts, they'll probably want to put a little bit more preference towards having some of that early penetration online sooner than you think. The Erlong hover here is interesting, though, because Erlong, God, that has a lot of initiation potential, and I think they could work for sure alongside of the Emoji and the Giannis because you do have enough of that early game presence to actually be able to apply a lot of that pressure from the Erlong Shen. My primary concern, though, Serket, Fafnir, both relatively strong gods at counteracting Erlong.
Especially, I mean, Serket, hey, he just hit your taunt. Cool, I'm going to go ahead and make all of that healing moot. You're not going to get anything off of that when I ult you. It also doesn't necessarily, like, it's not a bad pick for Sam, but in my mind, it's also not a very Sam-oriented pick. I mean, there's a lot of setup, as you had highlighted, but I like to, Sam typically gets on those carries, and actually, they ban in a Wheelish. They might think that it's not even going to be Sam playing it.
There is a chance for god picks like this Erlong to be relatively flexible amongst a team like the Jade Dragons.
Since we've seen an Erlong solo.
But you have to remember that FineOK,
he'll play anything.
Mike, Sam, they all have, I think, the individual mechanical talent available to make it work. And it's that threat of the flexibility that I think is crucial here because the Bolts still have to look at potential jungle bans as options since they don't want to allow an ideal, because you already have the knockup from Riptide. You already have the possible knockup from Erlong Shen's transformation in that third stance for the turtle form, and you just don't really want to risk that easy of a setup opportunity. Plus, Awelish relatively strong as is against the Circuit because of her ambush, and Fafnir as well, with a lot of that jump and initiation power, not going to be as effective if Awelish is on the playing field. But an on-her ban, it's just continuing to be the reign of focusing out Panda Cat's God Pull as the theme here for the Bolts.
I mean, if you want it, because I'll just give Sam the credit, right? That Fenrir is also a fine okay and mainly a PBM shot as well, but it's Panda Cat, Sam. Panda Cat, Sam, Panda Cat. That's their bans. They were like, who do we need to control here? And it seems like, again, even though Herowind is such a huge threat, Fino's a huge threat, PBM's a huge threat, they're trying to narrow down the carries a little bit more. And they know, depending on what type of Giannis we get today from Herowind, that's something that they can handle a little bit more easily. Although, normally this is a spot where I talk about Jake, and he loves going Ares against Giannis. That's so great, but he's got the Fafnir. Still some decent lockdown, maybe not as consistent as they'll need.
Curious if Haddox might actually lean back towards that Guan Yu, although I think that the Guan Yu is a little bit more reserved for the Bolts whenever they actually have the Emoja on their side, just because of the sustain that's being able to be dogpiled on top of each other, which is just nice for a team fighting environment. The hover of Sobek, though, could be an interesting switch up. Haddox, being such an aggressive play style, I do think that he could certainly be effective when piloting the Sobek in that solo lane, but he might lose a little bit of that edge in terms of just how aggressive he can be with the laning pressure.
I don't expect Sobek and Cullen, I don't really see Sobek being the one getting the kills in that lane. I don't expect him to be losing that lane too often either. He's just going to, again, what most Guardians like to do over there, go net neutral, wait until some setup's going to come through. But the good news is Sobek plus Circuit, not only is there a ton of displacement, but Lasper is going to have a lot of setup for him. So the 2v1s and the gank potential over there in solo lane maybe goes up a little bit here for the Bolts.
And a Cupid lock-in. Been a hot minute since we've seen Cupid actually make his way into the Smite Pro League playing field.
I think it's all Dragons all day in the predictions. As of late, though, especially with the way that Phase 2 has gone so far, a lot of people leaning towards the Bolts.
Yeah, I think Caster's predictions had everyone going Bolts except for Aggro, who votes with the community. So we need to find this dub. No way Aggro gets to be the only guy right on the team. He's insufferable enough as is. And I think the Bolts have got themselves a draft that can certainly do it. It's a very consistent draft. Lazarus finds a pick that he is very comfortable on inside of the Circuit. Jake has had great strides on this Fafnir pick as well. It's going to be a very objective, focused composition. That's generally the rule of the game when you're rocking double Hunter plus Fafnir.
It feels like Lasbrus felt so comfortable on that Gilgamesh, the Circuit. Another pick that's often not allowed to be played by Lasbor, or at least picked around, because we have seen him absolutely control the jungle on this pick. Veneno will be on the Soul here out of the mid lane up against Hurdy, went back on the Giannis. And we had this conversation a little bit yesterday during the Dragon set, where early in Season 8, it was Hurdy wins Giannis, and it was the talk of the town. Do you ban it? Do you pick against it? We had segments dedicated to talking about that. Has been on a bit of a back burner since then, but still maybe in a very strong spot here, and I think the way we all like to word it, Miff, sometimes all it takes is one. One through space and time could turn a game around. Hurdy win, I think, was 1-4 to start off the set yesterday on the Giannis, and things really turned around. So there's a big threat, really on both sides. Big burst damage that could set up team fights for Ven and for Hurrywind.
You know what it was? It might have been the salty Tower Boy incident that kind of put the kibosh on this consistent Giannis pick.
That's right.
Since then, Hurrywind hasn't really been going for it too often. Now trying to bring it back up against Venenu himself. I'm excited for it. I said yesterday that it looked like he was a little bit rusty on this pick, was struggling to find his initiations exactly where he wanted to portal in, but he definitely cleaned it up as the game went on, and well, now hot hands, got to expect he's going to be pretty good on it here today.
Yeah, I want to see what Hurrywind's going to get done here in game number 1. Polar Bear Mike receiving a lot of damage from Barracuda as he whirls on around. Polar Bear Mike disarmed, but not enough damage from Bear. There's a stun on the back end from Panicat, who's got big damage here. First blood right around the corner, but who's going to get it? Barracuda not yet. Panicat guns him down, and the Jade Dragon's on the board first.
Man, what a crazy bait there. Mike, it was so low HP. Gets around the corner. There was no chase potential as the Rising Jaguar was already used by Barracuda. The turnaround, so clean. Jake blocks maybe 20 auto attacks, but needed to block some more. Maybe you see a Heavenly Sprint get picked up by the Olympus Bulls just to deal with the Fields of Love.
Watch out, Hurrywin.
In some trouble, but Soul has to separate, bud. Don't have to be worried, but nice portal!
Whoa, the damage is big, but not enough to get the kill onto Veneno. Venenu, and that's pretty simple there. Sanford Soccer just walks up, gets the pin, wails on Venenu for a moment, and Hurrywind is there to follow up with the damage. Through Space and Time is online now. Venenu has his ultimate there as well, and so it's right around that early mark. We're just shy of 4 minutes here into this game. We'll cross over it by the end of this sentence. And that's where Hurrywind can start making some plays here. Instead, the plays will happen over in the duo lane. Barracuda doesn't have much of a chance here. The best you can do is turn around some damage. Sanford Soccer rotates around the backside, but it won't be needed here as Polar Bear Mike gets the opening kill onto Barracuda, but Sanford Soccer is going to be useful as a double kill for the Emoja rolls its way in.
And this all off the back of that great bait earlier on from PBM.
3 kills have transformed or made themselves aware to the tune of 1,500 gold in the lead for the Jade Dragons here. That's a sneaky Riptide from PBM, forces Barracuda to walk forward right into the Cupid ultimate. Panda Cat will drop the stun. That won't end up being a stun onto Awesome Jake, but look at just this pressure that's being absorbed, Myth, by the duo lane. Lasbra could make some waves here, but he's on his own. No one else from the Olympus Bolts is going to be able to drop back and help out with this fight unless Awesome Jake and Barracuda get in late. Goodbye. Hurrywind deletes Lasbra, then through Space and Time helps close the gap onto Venenu, who's just casually rotating on in from the mid lane. The Jade Dragons playing like something possessed right now, and Hurrywind will help out Sanford Soccer in another kill.
The Jade Dragons have come to play. 5 kills in 7 minutes for the Chaos team, and that is a heads-up awareness play from the Dragons. They spot out Lasbra on a ward. You saw the ping come through, and it's an immediate collapse. We're not concerned with this duo lane. Jake and Barracuda both below 20% HP, but not the targets. It's Lasbra who falls down immediately, and then Hurrywind with the through Space and Time to chase out the kill onto Ven. It is constant aggression, and it's already netted the Dragons just about 3,000 gold. Around the 15-minute mark, it could start to slowly slip out of the Bolt's control. Lasbra getting involved. Sam caught out.
Oh, that's a good portal and a good taunt from Sam for Soccer. Hurrywind and Sam, the 1-2 punch, peels out the engage there on the mid lane, and Awesome Jake and Lasbra are going to have to turn tail. That's kind of a good segue into my next thought here, where Sam has just been all over the place here in this game. I wonder what PBM is going to maybe look for here. Could be a collapse in on the Tier 1 tower. No, instead Gold Fury actually started up here by the Jade Dragons. Red buff as well. PBM's just going to try to solo that one out and complete the solo, but Gold Fury taken low here. Barracuda rotating on over. Jade Dragons take the Fury. Barracuda gets the first kill of the game for the Olympus Bolts, and it's on to Sanford Soccer, but of course Mike is going to hit that one. It's a inch perfect Rivers Rebuke, and PBM on a killing spree. I have no clue how they work. Smite, a game that requires some of that. You know how that works, so that's pretty good on your end. Jade Dragons, the way that this game is going, Bancroft's into what looks like might be a Typhon's Fang. Seems like it'll be all but necessary for this soul.
It's going to help him out a lot with his ability damage, but is slowing down the auto attacks ever so slightly. But with the neutral objectives looking as they are, with the control that the Jade Dragons have, I mean, I don't see the Bolts going towards a Pyromancer or a Gold Fury anytime soon.
Well, look at this. Jake accepts the Riptide from PBM. Barracuda left alone. Baits out the ultimate from Sanford Soccer there a little bit, but Sanford Soccer returns the favor. And now Barracuda, of course, it's Barracuda. He's going to get hit by that every time, and it's Hurrywind. He'll hit those every time. Barracuda now 1-4. Where do you think all that pressure's been going, Miff? Over into the duo lane, over onto this X-Ball, and the Olympus Bolts. Poor duo lane has just not had a moment to breathe.
Man, is it Hurrywind playing really well today, or is it Hurrywind getting the counter matchup into Barracuda? Awesome Jake caught out a little bit here, but no Omi for PBM until he drops this ult.
Yeah, it's an okay ult from PBM this time, a leap away from Lasbra will secure the escape, and then a disapparate from Venenu there as well. Mike trying to keep that pressure on. A stun connects there. Maybe you're thinking something could happen. Instead, it's a pluck in onto PBM by Haddix. A portal onto the back line slows down the re-engagement from the rest of the Bolts. Damage from Venenu is just a bit shy there, but look at Haddix. He wants to keep going. He wants more. Barracuda is back up from base, so maybe this is a chance for the Bolts to catch the Dragons a bit off guard, and Sanford Soccer the one tossed back.
He's going to have to retreat here. Haddix not quite on the mark, but does find the tail whip, and that will be a kill for Barracuda. The dot damage from Poison Darts putting in the work there. Jade Dragons stick around a little bit too long, creating space. If Haddix is standing between you and the back line of the Olympus Bolts, well, you can't just ignore him. Sunder all of a sudden would make it a little bit easier to shut him down.
Stun onto Hurrywind, then he's tossed right back into the fray, but look at the Aegis, it avoids
so
much damage there, and then there's a knock-up from Sanford Soccer, and down goes Lasbra, and the Jade Dragons, they turtle up underneath that Tier 1 tower and turn down the engage of Laz, who is now 0-2 on this Circuit. Look, it was well-timed. Hurrywind doesn't have beads for another 45 seconds by the end of this sentence. Unfortunately, the Aegis was still up, and that avoids death.
It does. Hurrywin playing so well right now around his positioning, around his target selection. These ganks have been on time as well. And now the Olympus Bolts going to be suffering from a lack of jungler for the next 5 seconds, which is unfortunate timing again, as the Jade Dragons could start to look towards the Oni Fury, but it's the Bolts actually who started up.
You think this has got to be a bit of a response check, right? If the Dragons show up, we're peeling off a bit,
Going
but we're
low.
too far in now. We've committed too much, and the Jade Dragons steal away the Fury. No rest for the Olympus Bolts as PBM throws up the River's Rebuke, and Barracuda wants nothing to do with it. Out he spins, but it's a pin, of course, and a double knockup from Sam for Soccer. The Jade Dragons get the Fury, and they'll get more. The Tier 2 tower being dove.
Then on the retreat, and the Heart Bomb delivered to him by Jake. Unfortunate double kill for Final K. Lazra and Haddix just got to limp away from this one. Jade Dragons just have so much of the momentum. The Olympus Bolts decide that, all right, we're too deep into it. It's down to 10%. We have to finish off this Oni Fury. Well, the Jade Dragons were already there. That was thin margins that gets them that steal. And then the team fight afterward, obviously going to favor the team that wasn't tanking up the objective.
God, this is brutal. I mean, look, Oni waves are dealt with aptly by either team here at this point, but that wouldn't have been nice, wouldn't it, for the Bolts? They get a little bit of space with these Oni waves. Fine, okay. 2v1 here on the right-hand side through space and time's not going to be there. Oh, Fine, okay, turns it around, and PBM is there with some healing as well. Fido is going to live. I'm casually calling that, assuming it's all said and done. But it never is. It never is with Final K, and in this game, apparently nothing's going to go right for the Bolts.
I was so ready to roast Final K for up-downing with the Salmon Leap instead of going towards the portal, but he knew the healing was coming his way. He knew PBM has his back. Jade Dragons turn around, even though it is only 16 minutes into this one.
Agro's in the green room right now, counting his money. Not that we all put any money on this one. We've learned better, but here's this turnaround. He is so low in this fight. My goodness. Yeah, what? 15 HP? Is that what that was? Didn't catch on the health bar. That is ridiculous. He was 1 auto away from dead there. It was planned, right? Jade Dragons planning, though. Around this FG now, River's Rebuke from PBM. It slows things down, and the Jade Dragons secure the FG. Panda Cat will secure the kill onto Haddix on the back end, and Final K continues his tear. No chance for Benenu here. It's another one for the Kukulkan.
Man, I was saying yesterday I was worried about the Jade Dragons' ability to push their leads. They were so far in the lead in their last set for so long, and they weren't quite able to close it out. Seems like they've alleviated those issues, man. This is a crazy pace being set here by them. And already knocking on the door of the Titan. Probably not an end. If they could stop both these backs on the left-hand side, keep your eye on Sam. If he can keep Lazra and Barra out, they could look for the end.
Sam for Soccer. 2v1 here. Barracuda uses the Aegis. Sam for Soccer just shy of the kill here. Barracuda turns it around. It's a taunt in from Lazra, and it won't be the double turnaround from the Jade Dragons this time. Mid lane Phoenix goes down. And that's the call for the back off now. Fine, okay. PBM, Panda Cat, they all have beads ready to go. You're pretty for the Jade Dragons to take here. If this game goes on to the next FG, a weakened or a down Phoenix on the left-hand side is going to make sieging up that FG just a little bit better here. I mean, there's got to be the stand, right? If the Jade Dragons run this fight, you're looking at game.
You are, and that Phoenix is going down so quick. The Bolts are not putting up much of a defense. Lazra does have the flank, and Jade Dragons taking a much slower approach to this Phoenix. Don't want to put any risk up to it. Sam for Soccer does not have Fire Giant, so he's going to be very reliant on the Emoja and his own ultimate for sustain. This slow pace, again, can't hurt the Jade Dragons too much. We still have 2.5 minutes left on this Fire Giant. What?
Yeah, this one's been quick. We got a Phoenix like 10 seconds into this Fire Giant buff and a minute and 15 left on the remaining. Look at the blitz on in through space and time from Hurrywin. Clips over onto Haddix as PBM throws up the walls here, and Barracuda caught in the front line, and Panda Cat puts him in the dirt. Lazra limping away from the rest of this fight here, but Sam for Soccer's going to run him down. The Riptide from PBM pulls Venenu right back into the fray. The kills aren't rolling through just yet, but everyone from the Bolts has to retreat here. It's a killing spree for Hurrywin, and the Jade Dragons turn their eyes to the Titans.
Still 3 members of the Bolts alive. Can look to put up a defense. Has to go big.
Venenu comes back out from the fountain here. Does not have his ultimate. Lazra jumps into the back line. The Heart Bomb onto the Circuit. Titan above half HP. The portal perfectly placed. Goodbye, Lazra. Now the Jade Dragons only have 2 members of the Bolts to work through here, but the Titan won't care. Jade Dragons in 20 minutes take game 1.
This comes through, and all of a sudden they start picking up First Blood. First Blood goes their way. Okay, well maybe that's not the end of the world. And this is actually where it is. Mike gets just out of dodge on that one auto that would have killed him, and is able to help turn this kill around immediately because they sandwich in the Bolts. And this this indicates that this is going to be a 50-minute game to me. Everything's going to be back and forth even. But then they came back to the duo lane, Taco. And then they came back to the duo lane again. And then, you know what? They did it again just for good measure. And Bera just didn't get to play the game.
No, that double whammy at the start for Barracuda just kind of set a little bit of foreshadowing maybe for the Bolts for as to what was going to actually be taking place here. Hurrywin does well on the Giannis. Every single opportunity that we thought Bear was going to get a chance to farm just completely taken away from him. The Jade Dragons were absolutely relentless with this duo side pressure. They completely abused some of the early woes that Xbalanque can experience in terms of laning phase pressure, and it all starts with Mike and Pandacat just making an excellent heads-up play to begin the game.
It was 15 minutes before we had a highlight reel from anything that didn't start around a purple buff or in the duo lane itself. And then no matter what, you end up jumping back to pretty much the exact same spot. They just played this so well on the Dragons. And again, they got themselves to an early lead, led to even more of a lead. I think at one point Dave and Mifflin had highlighted it saying like, okay, we're going to invade your red buff. You're going to defend red? Cool, we're going to Gold Fury. Like, you've got to make a decision here, and none of them are good decisions. If you step up to the Gold Fury, we'll either kill you or go steal the red. Like, no matter where you are, going to be able to come in and rotate to these objectives and cause some trouble. Haddock's on a Sobek? What's he going to do? Pluck me? Okay, cool. Now I'm in a better spot. I think that really ended up helping out the Dragons a little bit more, having a Guardian of all things over there, because the setup, there was no one to follow up for what Haddock's had.
It was great front line from the Bolts, for sure. When you have a Sobek and a Fafnir, always, I think, heads-up opportunities to try and have a strong team fight behind you. But when your carries just get sat on, as hard as the Jade Dragon sat on top of Barracuda, really wasn't anything left for Veneno to do. When the whole team is so far behind in experience, there just isn't really much of an opportunity for that Soul to try and step up and make a difference, because Jade Dragons are just too far out in front. Celebrate Supernova not going to actually be able to combine for a lot of that early game or mid-game even pressure that we oftentimes have seen. But it's going to be the Emoja taken first here by the Bolts. A different little switch up here compared to game one. But Gore, so far what you're seeing in the picks and bans, do you like it?
I mean, I like the Emoja, but now I'm worried about like a Giannis Ymir pickup. Like you grab the Giannis again for Hurwin, worked out really well last time around, and then you grab another great support for PBM to be able to play. He's going to go for the Fafnir. Either one is going to be aggressive and really open up the door for the Dragons. And I'm a little worried because even with the Emoja, even with all the things that are available, I mean, this is where they went Serket Fafnir last time, being able to swap that maybe Serket Soul since those were in their top three. I just don't know that that's the route I'd want to go if I'm the Bolts here. I think I need to change up most of my strategy to deal with this Giannis first, then maybe to give a little bit of help towards Bear in the duo lane.
Anything you can do, I can do better seems to be what these two teams are taking away from each other. It looks like mild swaps across the board. You've got the Emoja and Erlong Shen now for the Bolts, as opposed to the Jade Dragons, who took that Fafnir away from Awesome Jake in response to losing the Emoja. But again, I think this all definitely plays back into that original topic that we touched on for the Descore, and that's that these two teams have a ton of similarities in terms of their drafting preferences.
And this, I mean, follows that perfectly, right? Odin has been something that FineOK has played and that the Bolts have played. The Bolts love to go with it with the Morrigan, have the double cage. But FineOK just likes to have this pick, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a bully here. I mean, you already have something that's going to start shutting down the Emoja healing, the Soul healing, and the Erlong Shen healing if you can get them in the cage. But on top of that, I mean, Soul, yes, technically should be able to help beat down one wall fast, but I still feel like it's going to be pretty oppressive. You add Bera into the mix, maybe late-game team fights, you're not looking at the cage, but then you start factoring in the shield, the Raven Shout, the jump, the stun that Odin's bringing. I don't know. I like FineOK's pick here.
Definitely still a little bit of jungle focus coming out of the Bolts here, as well as Mercury and a Wheelish will join the other bands that the Bolts have opted for so far. Raven, Daji, Bolts still available here, though, for Sam if he wants to try and continue feeding into this team fight engagement presence, but it's actually going to be the Humbats. How could I forget about the Humbats? The Fear No Evil coincides perfectly, I think, with that Odin cage on top of the Fafnir. The Draconic form covers a lot of AoE, and it's definitely just pressure for the Bolts to try and play into because there's so much counter engage with that Fear No Evil alone.
I think the matchup between Bera and Pandacat here, like everything else I can see going toe for toe as of right now, But that final lock-in is really what I'm going to hinge the Dragons. Like, Panda Cat, he can play so much, so well, but what he locks in, if he's going to be able to control it, we've seen Sam's Hunbats, it's insane. We've seen Final K's Odin. It's something that's difficult to deal with. Same thing for the Giannis and the Fafnir. And if they can lock it in with like just a 5th pick that just feels too oppressive for the Bolts, I think it might be a little bit of a longer game. I don't know that the Bolts are going to let them have as much free reign, but it's not going to be an easy matchup by any means. The Bolts are going to have to work really hard for this one.
Yeah, the other thing to note as well is the fact that with this King Arthur being locked in for presumably Haddix and the Rom, the Bolts don't seem to really be all that intimidated right now, Gore, of that Odin cage. Rom, granted, can escape for a short period of time when he's up in that Astral Barrage. However, Rom, at the end of the day, still relatively susceptible to getting punished inside of that Odin cage.
Now, I'm going to say, if this does get locked in, I feel like Panda Cat is just like sitting down, or maybe it's Cabal. Maybe I need to give the credit a little higher up. That's looking at like, okay, let's look at Season 7. Let's look at Season 6, Season 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's look at every Hunter matchup that has existed in Smite, because there was that triangle a few years ago of like, oh man, Artemis will beat X-Ball, who will beat, or no, Artemis will beat Cupid, who will beat X-Ball, who will beat Artemis, and that was like the weird triangle we had for a while. And Rom and AMC, I don't know how many years ago it was off the top of my head, but that used to be like the duo lane.
I think the Olympus Bolts would have been able to hang in there a little bit longer, so I'm expecting the Bolts, with that in mind, to take this game at a little bit of a slower pace. Don't try and push the issue too much. Instead, play around that mid-game, and, well, their draft fits that incredibly well. If they're able to come to the point where they can start looking at a Gold Fury from even, I mean, the desk highlighted it briefly, this is a phenomenal objective burn composition, and I think that is the strategy for them.
We know what happens now. The Dragons go twice as fast that you said. You said maybe they'll slow it down. That means the Jade Dragons are just they're gonna say, all right, game 1 was slow compared to how we really want to play. Just kidding, that's not. There's no faster, I don't think, that you could go.
It was like an 18-minute game this year, right?
That's right. We could have gone 2 minutes faster. We'll see if the Jade Dragons are able to get it that fast. Haddix on a bit of a different pick this time. King Arthur for himself there instead of the Sobek. We've seen plenty of examples of why Sobek, why Guardians in the solo lane can work. But I think this is a good chance for Haddix to really show his strong suit. It's the aggressive, in-your-face, run-you-down type of play style, and I think the King Arthur fits that well.
Yeah, last game we had Haddix, this game we get Chaddix, and hopefully he lives up to that moniker, and I think he certainly can on this King Arthur pick. Panda Cat, though, putting a ton of damage into Barracuda. I mean, wow. Transcendence Bluestone start, yeah, you're going to be swinging for the fences with your abilities. Barracuda, though, is at least going to be able to rely on the 408 for some healing in this lane.
What do we think here, Miff? PBM goes for the Horrific Emblem as his starter item here. It's often, I'll hold that thought, as Lasbro's around the backside of PBM and Panda Cat here. Stun, good onto Panda. Trying to read out the jump is Lasbro. Lasbro's not going to get the pin onto anyone, and the stun and the emblem on the backside, and somehow it's Lasbro that looks worse for wear, and the Jade Dragons attempting maybe a 2v3 here in the duo lane. If you tell me Lasbro's attempting a level 2, level 3 gank.
Or supports rather rotate out of the lane, start to see these 3v3s roll through, or maybe just Sam for Soccer does it now.
Yeah, Sam is here with the Fear No Evil. Beads used by Barracuda. Awesome Jake is not going to have the same chance. It's a Riptide away, but Sam for Soccer there on the follow-up. The leap, not read properly, but Hurrywind from the mid lane hits the through space in time, and now the Giannis of all people on the board.
That one first was a great start for it.
That is a great start. Pythax piece yet again for Hurrywind. Seemed to work out. Now the Olympus Bolts, they don't want to cede all pressure here in this early game. Lasbra will not get the taunt in because beads were used. Now Sam for Soccer in on the follow-up. Fear No Evil, still 50% of the way there. Jake looks like he's going to sacrifice himself a bit. Here's a Riptide goes away, but Lasbra is stuck around. Polar Bear Mike gets the first. Hurrywind gets the second. And the Jade Dragons, yeah, it's slower, but they're still off to a great start.
I wonder why Jake decides to stick around inside of that. Once you drop that ultimate, you can walk through your own walls. You can get out of there, but instead, you said it looks like he was trying to sacrifice himself, and he does so, but it doesn't really get too much out alive. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, ultimate trade from the Soul Laners about ganks coming his way, or maybe these team fights around the objectives. So I do agree with the itemization path. 408, though, caught out a little bit here. PBM on the chase.
Hurrywind is there as well. It's a stun over onto Awesome Jake. Rivers Review catches out 3. Lasbra catches out 2. He's there on the follow-up, but there needs to be more damage. The Bolts have all this setup, but the damage hasn't found its way in just yet. Instead, Lasbro deleted. Vanenu returns the favor, though. Barracuda, he joins the fray, and now Panda Cat goes down. Here come the snipes, looking for a couple more. 1 and 2 are good, 3 good as well. Vanenu has the double, and the Olympus Bolts, they buy their time, and they buy a fight.
Man, Haddix just beats out Final K on the rotation, and the fight completely turns around. Sanford Soccer was not able to rejoin the engagement after the Fear No Evil was already expended, so the Olympus Bolts surge forward, dive into the backline, shut down Panda Cat and Hurrywin, and get themselves the first neutral objective of this one. And despite that being such a huge swing for the Bolts, it still is a net neutral game here. We're looking at a dead even game state.
Now it's these next few moments that really turn things around, going into the Pyro, going in to the FG. Lasbra, no ultimate, makes his way on over towards the right, though. Sanford Soccer doesn't have his ultimate either. Got to figure no real fight to be won here. There's a blue buff up if the Olympus Bolts want to try to engage on that one. But the Bolts have never really felt on the back foot. They've kind of continued looking forward, sometimes looking for these red buffs. The Jade Dragons have done so as well. Haddix has to be careful here because PBM is rotating over, and FineOK does a chunky little bit of damage with that crow jump. FineOK could close the gap. Oh, pinch perfect on the sidestep there from Haddix. But he's going to turn around. He's going to get dove here beneath his Tier 1 tower, and it's FineOK who grabs it.
That was a long chase from the Jade Dragons. That took a very long time. Got to think Lasbra could have likely used his own ultimate for a little bit of peel, but maybe steps up too far.
Wow, the turnaround. Lasbra, is going to get a bit of a heal here in a moment. There's a portal right on through. The heal comes in as PBM continues to waltz on forward. Watch out for the hammer stun on the backside. The slow is there onto Lasbra, and at this point it's just who. And Hurrywind is the who. 3-1 and 3 on the yacht. Just yet, still a couple levels shy of that, if that's what Lasbra ends up needing. So at least you have pseudo beads here in the first 13 minutes.
And it's a great pickup considering all the single target CC, but FineOK does find the cage on a Haddix, but maybe not the best target. Instead, decides to chase out Jake.
Awesome Jake is low here, but he's going to be able to sustain up just a little bit. FineOK jumps on away, Haddix in on the chase.
Sam.
Hurrywin could let some damage flow through, but instead it's Awesome Jake onto Sanford Soccer, who gets the Fear No Evil off. That sends FineOK back, running away. Lasbra eats the through space in time from Hurrywin here, so the Erlong Shen just shy of becoming 0-4 here. Pyromancer started up by the Olympus Bolts.
And it's burning away quickly. The desk brought it up how great their objective burn is, and yeah, it's already gone. Haddix playing goaltender. Maybe
that little bit of extra damage helps set up for your team.
If there's one thing you want to connect onto the back line here from the Olympus Bolts, it's the Erlang Shen. Lasbra, sitting at the dead last in the damage charts, has not quite been able to close gap and deal consistent damage with his auto attacks. It's one of the byproducts of falling behind on Erlang Shen as the Olympus Bolts pull the Primal Fury, reset. Wow. Too many people from the Jade Dragons around.
Haddix uses his beads here. That's a tough loss if the Olympus Bolts end up aggressing on this fight. Instead, FineOK jumps in. He's got 2 in the cage through space and time over onto Barracuda, but he's able to get up into the sky, send some snipes on downwards, and he'll crash down into the River's Rebuke. So Barracuda is safe for the time being, but it looks like the Bolts, they're regathering themselves to push on in as the Jade Dragons elect to leave.
Panda Cat, so low HP, cannot stick around much longer and does not have any lifesteal inside of the build. Has to rely on that lifesteal from his passive inside the Axe stance, whereas the Olympus Bolts have a ton of sustain inside of their team. Lasbra's ultimate soul.
Healthy.
I mean, Barracuda's feeling just fine. All that healing from Yamoja. Yeah, it's still ringing through. Couldn't even tell me the Olympus Bolts were in a fight just a moment ago. They are healthy.
4 ultimates down for the Olympus Bolts. It's only Haddix who has his on the other side. Fear No Evil is there. That's a big one. Big engage tool for the Jade Dragons ready to go. 4 sets of beads, though, for the Olympus Bolts could make the difference. PBM walks on in towards the Primal Fury here. Sanford Soccer over the Fury wall, looking for that impactful Fear No Evil that hasn't found its way in just yet. He's got 3 sets of beads, and Sanford Soccer with a big engage. And now the Olympus Bolts, they back their way away just a little bit, but Barracuda wailing away on the FineOK. Now Haddix throws out the last ultimate available in this team fight, and Barracuda whittles down that health bar. It's another one for the Olympus Bolts as the Jade Dragon scattering in the wind. Haddix gets the double, and Polar Bear Mike will fall soon.
Olympus Bolts just have way too much healing. PBM extends his life a little bit by getting over the wall, but maybe just gets out alive completely here. The Olympus Bolts have so much time to work with, so much sustain. It's only Jake that's low HP. Makes sense to see where they're starting to walk over towards. It's that Fire Giant that they're looking at. Thought maybe we'd see him go towards Hurrywin if he steps forward, but instead, more so on the objective, and it's going to burn quickly 18 minutes into this one.
Here we go. Hurrywin halfway to that through space and time. Haddix is going to do just fine in getting this backliner out of the fray. Polar Bear Mike is going to walk on in, try to close this gap. River's Rebuke used. by Awesome Jake. Awesome Jake could go down here. Olympus Bolts secure the FG. The timing there was scary, but the Bolts get the Fire Giant nonetheless. PBM now will fall down. See, I knew it was going to happen eventually, and Polar Bear Mike goes down, and the Olympus Bolts get the biggest lead of the game.
I can't argue with the decision-making from Mike there. He realizes, look, best case scenario, I steal Fire Giant. That's pretty good. Worst case scenario, I'm dead for 20 seconds.
20 seconds, yeah.
He's going to respawn. It's perfect.
Timing in sync completely. Every single second counting down at the same time. Had to be something that the Bolts were aware of. If we're going to commit onto this Fury, Sanford Soccer still has his ultimate. We're going to have to be ready on the beads. And ready they were. And it was that second wind, the regrouping and the push back in from the Bolts that really made a difference. Six towers remaining on the map becomes only 3 towers remaining on the map. Left side Phoenix open. Mid lane has 1 tier 2 remaining.
Mike does hit a very good power spike here, taking over to level 12, is finally able to get an Ankh for his team, so could help out a little bit with this healing we're starting to see from the Olympus Bolts, as well as help out the Jade Dragons with that initial spearhead inside the team fight. They need to win that team fight off the initial engagement, because if the Olympus Bolts are allowed to walk away, we've seen how quickly they heal back up.
Wow, the Jade Dragons putting up a fight around this tier 2 tower. The Riptide does nothing here. Finally, the wall gets broken, and the second Riptide does something, and that's Awesome Jake getting out alive. Hurrywind sends the through space and time right on over towards the mid lane, but that's not going to be there for any sort of damage, just repositioning. Venenu stunned in on the backline. Fear no evil. Catches out to a couple members of the Olympus Bolts, but all those beads used in sync yet again, and the Olympus Bolts are able to turn this one around. Poor Bear Mike, he's going to transform here, but he's still caught out by a couple members of the Olympus Bolts. Tier 2 tower dies in the mid lane. Be careful, Haddix. The Phoenix is swinging.
My heart goes out to Sanford Soccer. Blinks in twice this game and burns 4 beads, 4 sets of beads this time around. Absolutely correct, Dave. That is tough. I mean, if I'm in those comms, like, guys, burn like 1 beat so I could do something, please, because I'm doing it all right now. But there's not enough consistent CC on the side of the Jade Dragons. It really is just up to Sam.
That's true. It's fine okay hitting a stun, PBM or Panda Cat hitting these individual stuns in the portal. It's a lot of single target CC on the backside. Speaking of that, Panda Cat gets stunned down by Haddix as the left side Phoenix gets siege. Final K's got 3 in the cage, but the Olympus Bolts, they want to be there and they want to work forward. Final K jumps on away. It's a great portal from Hurrywind here to slow down the engage from the Olympus Bolts, and it looks like the Jade Dragons are going to get back to Fountain, heal things up through space and time. Doesn't do much.
Haddix thought maybe he can catch out Hurrywind on that teleport in, but does not have the CC available to him. Instead, Olympus Bolts going to be able to walk away from this one.
Provide some pressure here in a little bit, though, as those fire minion waves build up.
All the Olympus Bolts have to do if they want to utilize that fire minion wave is do what they've already been wanting to do, which is extend this team fight as long as possible. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case here, as Fire Giant is burning quickly. PBM and Final K on the defense. Lazra adding his goaltender for Hurrywind.
Lazra used his ultimate, but Hurrywind used his beads. That's important to look at here. Olympus Bolts have all 5 sets of beads ready to go. 4 of them were in sync with one another.
Yeah, get him, Sam.
And so the Olympus Bolts delayed out enough to have all those beads back and ready to go. Barracuda 25 seconds away from the Aegis. That's going to be big here. When you're a Rom, you land back down from the sky. You could still be in a threat, as Mifflin has already discussed here, whereas Hurrywind already mentioned no beads for the next 135 seconds or so. So if somebody from the Bolts finds that backline, Miff, could be tough to deal with.
Sanford Soccer forced to head back to base to contend with this fire minion wave, and the Olympus Bolts have been doing a good job of just generating threat on the map, forcing the Jade Dragons to stick around. Hurrywind
does
rotate, so he can ult over. He's got that global presence.
Yeah, Sanford Soccer's there, could engage in on this fight if need be. The Olympus Bolts know that Hurrywind's not here, and that's why they walk forward, but immediately walking away are the rest of the Jade Dragons. All you need is the 1-2 punch of Venenu and Barracuda on the Fire Giant, as it's now 50%? Reached half HP just because of the carries here. The Jade Dragon starting to regroup. They'll watch out for the through space and time. Final K has initiated onto Venenu, in onto the back, but the Disapparate buys him some time. Through space and time goes right through the uprights, and the Olympus Bolts are able to stave off that damage. Polar Bear Mike now left alone, taunted back in by Lazra, and then transforms to avoid the stun from Awesome Jake, but there's a River's Rebuke that spells death for the Fafnir.
Great cripple from Haddix. You can't jump out, and instead gets clapped by the river. Sanford Soccer on the edge there.
Never got to use his ult.
Has to start to run away. That is a tough one. I mean, Hurrywind was, what, maybe 2 pixels away from completely removing Ven from the game there. That's what we're talking about with this Yanis pick. If he's just a little bit more on the mark with that ultimate, that is a team fight that likely would have gone the way of the Jade Dragons instead. And if it's just that, well, I mean, he's only got it every, 50 seconds? You can't use it consistently on the defense.
Right, and if it gets used, and the Olympus Bolts are able just to hit the beads and then turn around the fight anyway.
And that's what they're doing.
Doesn't matter, right? That's what happened around that Fury, and that's where this game really turned around. Fine, okay. Charges up the stun on the backside. Pops the bubble of Lazarus, so that feels pretty good, but Lazarus still has the beads. No life, though, on this left side Phoenix as the Olympus Bolts walk on in and take down the weakened Phoenix somewhat easily, I think. Tough, though. Lazarus uses the ultimate there. I don't see any beads down except for the ones respawning here for Panda Cat.
Hey, luckily Lazarus still got a Yamoja and a King Arthur to start burning beads for his team. It's going to be a little bit until he gets that ultimate available, a little bit for that survivability. But again, Lazarus not the reason that the Olympus Bolts are looking as good as they are right now. No. 6,800 damage on the charts, getting dwarfed by the carries on his team.
He is full build, and a good 9 turns blessing could absolutely set up a big fight win here. Polar Bear Mike's going to have to transform into the back line. Goes Sam for Soccer, but nobody's there to fear. The evil is not feared at all because Sam for Soccer hasn't found anyone. 2 sets of beads are down. Haddix and Awesome Jake have had to use theirs, the frontliners. Instead, the Olympus Bolts go around the backside and in onto the Titan. They see a Game 3 around the corner, and a Game 3 we shall have. The Olympus Bolts take Game 2.
We're getting off to, I want to say, a slower but still aggressive start, and it felt like we were going to see some sort of pop-offs from them. They were starting to get some of those kills. Of course, Herwin happens to find the exact shot that he needs to be able to find it through time and space kill, or through space and time kill, I should say. But it slowly transitioned from this, like level 5 team for the Dragons to Bolts victories. I mean, once they get those 3 kills online, you can already see the next highlight immediately. It jumps up 3-4. They ended up with a 3-for-1 trade, and I think it ended up being a really big pivot, more or less around the 12-minute mark for the Bolts.
This just kind of came down to a war of attrition here for the Olympus Bolts, and they had all the sustain you could ask for and some with this Yamoja. Awesome Jake just really helping his team, and the patience as well from the Bolts. Very important to highlight that here, Gore, because the Odin Cage could have certainly put a damper on the Olympus Bolts and all of their team fight sustain, but the way that they chose to play around that Odin Cage just put so much pressure onto Sam. He was really the only consistent member for beads burn and relics burns in general off the Fear No Evil, but the Olympus Bolts, they had no issues just biding their time, waiting for the Fear No Evil to go down, waiting for the Odin Cage to go down, and then that's when they looked for their chance to strike.
And it's given me a little bit of flashbacks for those who don't remember back in Phase 1. Once the group stage started, these two didn't play each other until the playoffs, but when they did play each other for like a regular season set, Dragons won Game 1, Bolts won Game 2, and then if you're just the Bolts, you do want to slay the Dragons.
The Bolts definitely looking to see if they can continue to be Dragon Slayers like they were in game number 2, but this is a tough spot now for the Bolts core as they find themselves in that second pick position. Jade Dragons going to choose to eliminate that Morgan first and foremost. Seems as though Venenu's not going to have his way with that Morgan anytime soon. A lot of teams placing preference towards that ban up against the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah.
And Bolts, I'm sure, follow suit, but they'll be the ones having to take away the Tiamat this time.
I'm interested to see it because I think it's specifically been Phase 2 that it's really jumped up to the top. But this, the Morgan has been banned out against Vin more in the last few weeks than I would argue maybe last year combined. It has been a go-to pick for them. It has been devastating if they get the right combos on their hands. Sometimes they don't even need the right combos. It's just Vin playing Morgan that makes it threatening. And so I like the Dragons banning it. I also like the fact that they're putting some leverage on the fact that they're first pick.
And the other thing of note, too, from that second game that we saw between the Jade Dragons and Bolts, I actually felt like the damage numbers were relatively similar, aside from the fact that, everyone was clearly leading the way in player damage, but it just felt like the Jade Dragons weren't able to actually find all of their damage at a singular given instance.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to have that steep burst of damage whenever you're dealing with the likes of a sustained composition. But with Fafnir now being banned away, starting to wonder if this is the Jade Dragons alluding to the fact that they want to take that Yamoja pick for themselves yet again.
I mean, this will be, as of right now, the first game this set. Artemis is available if Yamoja makes it through, which she won't, so we can take that one off the board. The Ymir's still available. Fafnir finally getting removed, maybe limiting some of those pickups that you're going to be able to grab for the supports. But it opens up the dueling to be aggressive.
Mercury is also open for the first time in forever up against the likes of Sam, but it is going to be a frontline priority here for the Jade Dragons as they take that Ymir for themselves. However, plenty of options here for the Bolts. You mentioned the Artemis Gore. You mentioned the likes of Frontline still wanting to be, I think, a heavy priority here. And Haddix as well, what are your thoughts on, as far as the switch-up is concerned, from that Sobek to the King Arthur?
I mean, King Arthur, it was like night and day, right? Sobek, you had highlighted it perfectly, which is Sobek can be a great solo lane pickup for you. but it depends on how your carries are doing. It's not just what can you do on your own. His King Arthur for Haddix, he doesn't care how Bara and Vin are doing. He's going to make them do well because he will do well. And I think that's kind of the opener. This is Osiris as well. Like, if you put Haddix on something he can play aggressive on, he is going to be able to help guide the team. If you put him on something that it is very good frontline but setup oriented, you really have to hope the pressure on Vin and Bara is light.
And that's the thing, is that the Jade Dragons, with that Amir in that first lock position, have to assume that this was meant to be not intimidation to the fullest extent of what that word means, but it's definitely trying to dissuade the Olympus Bolts from wanting to opt towards that Artemis, because Amir has such great lockdown potential against a god that doesn't have any sort of real escape aside from that wild hunt. But there's the Mercury pick that I was kind of hoping would actually get to come through. We haven't seen Sam on this pick in so long. A lot of teams opting to ban it away from him given how much success the Jade Dragons have been able to find with that choice. But Mercury, I think, could definitely struggle here a little bit in terms of his initiation prowess, just because of the fact that Osiris, Artemis, they both do have relatively strong disengage against that first initiation step.
The good news is that Ymir's there. Like, if Sam's going to play this Mercury the way that he has in the past, I can imagine, all right, Sam, go in, get the beads, get whatever disengage that Artemis is going to want from you. I'm going to throw up a wall then, and good luck, Bara, right? Have fun with that, deal with it. I think there's a lot of CC that's going to come through if they can combo it right, but again, stars have to align. Like, that Merkle goes way farther than you can deploy a Ymir wall, so the stars really have to be able to align for that one. But it's so interesting to see it because while it's not been infallible, Sam has lost one game on this Mercury this year. It's something that has been such an easy go-to the point where the Bolts, and I think notably a lot of people after the playoffs, it was a must ban. The fact that they let it through and get locked in here could prove problematic.
A ton of interrupt, though, for the Bolts with the introduction of this Horus. Now have to believe that that is likely going to be Horus for Awesome Jake in the support role, but not only that, I think that Horus has a great disengage as well with that ultimate that could potentially be the saving grace here for Barracuda, because right now, if Game 3 is anything like Games 1 and 2, Gore, Jade Dragons have already let it be known that their sole mission is trying to punish this duo lane and make sure Barracuda doesn't get a chance to actually play the game, because when he does, we see what happened with that ROM performance in game number 2, and the hypercarry potential is just as strong, if not more so, with the Artemis.
I like that they've kind of, I feel like, I don't want to use the phrase learned their lesson, but kind of learned their lesson. Like, they spent so many bans in game 1 specifically trying to target down Panda Cat. In game 2, they threw a little less, but still a couple of bans towards Panda Cat. I think this is a good adaptation from the Bolts, where it's just like, you know what? If we're going to beat you, it's not going to be by making you uncomfortable on you know, a various and sundry hunter that you play all the time anyway. It's going to be by making the team around you a little less comfortable. Unfortunately, Ymir, Mercury, Soul, those are all great Dragons picks, so they're really trying to limit, I think, these last two and find the way to control it, and that's where that Horus comes in.
I'm almost wondering if there's a possibility for a Kraken or a Cthulhu to make their way into this Jade Dragons composition, because both of those, I think, would be really strong frontline assets. And not only that, but when you add more walls on top of the Ymir wall, it can be very difficult to actually keep Artemis alive with all the lockdown. And I think it also just would make a prime environment for Mercury and this Soul to really come in for the collapse and follow-up punish.
And we got to see that Cthulhu the other day, or not even the other day, yesterday. It would have first set comes through, first game, and it looks good doing so. Granted, they had the Artemis that time around, and they also had a Tiamat, maybe a little helpful in terms of the team fights, but FineOK has showcased this year and recently that he can win on that pick, which I think is the big deal. Cthulhu took a long little pause, a hiatus from being seen here, and so something that could come through. There's a lot of good solo laners available. It's just what has a good matchup versus Osiris and will help in that late game fight against the Artemis. That's the difficulty to find the right one.
Panda Cat as well, I think, would probably want to try and fall back to some old habits here with the Panzaburu now making its way. This is the first time he'll actually get a chance to play this god this set. There's been a very heavy focus from the Bolts in trying to keep Panda Cat off this god specifically, and a large portion of that probably due to the fact that Panda, whenever he gets to Danzaboro, he just looks like he's in a league of his own playing it.
And I'm actually really excited to see not only the Danzaburo, but the combination. I mean, it was Danzaburo, Mercury. I guess Ymir was probably thrown in there a little bit during the Phase 1 playoffs that made it such a problem for them.
They're footing in Game 2. but they were able to get their footing, and then things felt comfortable with the engage from that point on. Now there are some serious pivots really on both sides. Sanford Soccer finally gets his Mercury, and admittedly a Mifflin, that's where my eyes go.
Yeah, that Mercury is going to be a huge determining factor, especially considering how immobile this Artemis is. But my eyes goes towards the entirety of this Olympus Bolts draft. This is a high execution
I don't care about your one. I want all
composition. Like, and that's a buzzword I think we throw around a lot on the casting team. High execution. What does that mean? It means that a comp that has very narrow win conditions. How do you win these team fights? Well, it's off the back of CC that is admittedly very hard to apply. 9 turns Blessing is the best AoE crowd control we're seeing here from the Olympus Bolts. Otherwise, it's Caledonian Boar, a single target from the awesome Jake, and that's so hard to use.
Jake dashes in but gets frozen by PBM. He'll dash away, sprint pop by Polar Bear Mike. He wants some more. Jake walking back in here as well. Remember how game 1 spiraled out of control when a trade just like that went the way of the Jade Dragons. This one, neither team with a big advantage. Jake uses his blink, PBM uses his sprint. Both hunters still have their beads, and Panda Cat might need them, but instead PBM wishes he had some beads. Oh, the drop back in from Panda Cat, unfortunately. Not enough. An awesome Jake on the board first here for the Olympus Bolts. In setting up some of those fights.
Yeah, the counter Mercury ward is between your enemy's Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower, because that is generally where the majority of his ganks are going to roll through. Lazara finds Fine OK and Haddix. Nice knockup.
Fine OK dashes away. Still has the ultimate, but with Sanford Soccer closing that gap, blue buff timers still pretty equal at this point here in the game, and so Lazara and Haddix think twice.
Shield is Sanford Soccer.
So this is interesting.
Still waiting. PBM though, look how deep he is.
Right, the ward is between the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 tower, but Sanford Soccer has not taken that route. PBM low here. Panda Cat stunned on the backside. Awesome Jake. He's going to drop ship all of the Olympus Bolts in behind PBM, but it's a massive stun from the Ymir, and that might have slowed things down. The rocket not blocked, and PBM the only one under real threat here, and it's Barracuda who picks up the kill, but Sanford Soccer turns it around, goes back in. Awesome Jake sent back, and Sanford Soccer returns the kill.
Support for support trade here. Hurry when Tyler making a slow rotation over, and there's really not much to fight over anymore. Instead, likely going to head on back to his lane. Ven allows an entire minion wave to go into his tower, so Hurrywin should have a slight advantage insofar as experience and maybe gank pressure. Lazara forced to use the blink defensively.
Yeah, a couple of the bolts go back to base there. They're not in range to help Lazara out in what would have been a 2v1 up against Sanford Soccer. So Sanford Soccer now on the board, and I think Panda Cat saw who was Awesome Jake, I think, that dropped that ward between the Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower. So that allowed Sanford Soccer to take a bit of a different route to engage in onto that fight. So at least for the Jade Dragon. So this is going to have to be a flip of the script, a flip of the switch maybe for Barracuda. Sanford Soccer charges his ultimate, catches out onto Barracuda.
Bad Boar
sent out, and Sanford Soccer will not be stunned. Barracuda does not have beads. I mean, he's sent right into the waiting arms of Panda Cat. And this is why Mercury gets banned against Sam, because he's able to run right down your lane and set up a kill.
Yeah, Jade Dragons dropped a sentry ward between their own Tier 1 and Tier 2 towers, saying, all right, if you guys want to be safe from Sanford Soccer, you're going to have to work a little bit harder than that, and it creates that space for him to go ahead and ult on through the lane. And, well, Barracuda, a little bit out of range on the Caledonian Boar, forced to walk into the jungle, meets Breznov for his efforts.
Red buff is going to respawn at the right time here for the Jade Dragons, who have this timer. The bolts are going to close this gap, so the Jade Dragons have to be quick, but are they quick enough? Lazara, he's got some damage, some CC maybe in onto Hurrywind. Awesome Jake still closing that gap, and now he's alone between a few members of the Jade Dragons. It's a knock-up over onto Panda Cap, and now Jake left alone, and look at Hurrywind, he's free in the backline, just pouring out damage into Awesome Jake, who ends up going down for his troubles. It's a red buff lost in a support in the dirt.
Jade Dragons clawing their way back into this one at about a half-level lead in both the jungle and mid, and it's Gold Fury getting looked at. Yeah, that's pretty nice.
This helps for the bolts if they're able to secure it.
Nobody's
there. Look at the Jade Dragons. Look at the reply. There is none. It's going to be Hurrywin still farming it up in the mid lane. PBM was walking on over towards the Gold Fury, but won't be in time, and that's going to get the Olympus bolts right back in the lead as far as gold goes, just shy of 1,000. But the answer from the Jade Dragons is let's put some pressure on the Pyromancer over here on the right. This should get close to evening things back up, and there's no reply from the bolts on the right-hand side. So both teams able to take some of these respawning objectives.
Calculate the Sanford Soccer passive onto the item.
I think the difference on the rage, it'll say Sanford Soccer rage, 100% crit chance, stacks to 100 once the rage is fully stacked. Sanford Soccer attempting to stack up some of that rage, but he is not going to get the chance. Great potion from the Nanu. Sends Sanford Soccer right back to base. Turns into the house as Haddix is rotated on over from the solo lane. PBM into Shards of Ice. The Boar flying on through from Barracuda. Actives used from Hurrywin, and the Olympus Bolts close the gap. And in one fell swoop, 3 members of the Dragons go down.
Man, I don't even know how Barracuda got there. I was actually so confused. I thought maybe he had blinked in like a Zardamus, but no. Just uses his feet like a mortal and is able to flank the entirety of the Jade Dragons, who had just stripped away the Tier 1 mid tower. Olympus Bolt's going to do the exact same and return it in spades. Tier 2 stripped away, and this early on, that is so much map control afforded to the Olympus Bolts. There is nowhere to escape to.
Oh, there you go. Doug helping us out a little
bit. Appreciate it.
It was the ultimate. And look, it surprises us, and we literally have a view of the entire map. PandaCat uses the rocket, though, here, 1v1 against Lasbro.
Miss once.
All of the autos connecting. Lasbro will stop the back, because in behind, hey, look, here come the rest of the Olympus Bolts. Unfortunate for PandaCat. Which dollar is he? I'm not sure. He's the dead dollar here in a moment, as the tower will send a shot his way, and Lasbro ends up picking up the kill. I admire the effort there from PandaCat. But the Olympus Bolt's just too mobile.
Seconds, Primal Fury spawning up very soon.
These rotations.
So Jade Dragon's trying to find a pick here.
These Olympus Bolts are just rotating so quickly into these fights. Awesome Jake playing so aggressive. Barracuda's health bar dwindling, though, as Final K has found the backliner. Barra will dodge the knock-up. And what an ultimate from Awesome Jake. You don't often say that about a big defensive ultimate, but this one looks good, and now the Olympus Bolts, the kings of the second wind team fight, are re-engaging in on the Final K. Venenu with his second of the game.
It's just that counter-punch style. Hurrywin now suffering the consequence.
My God.
Sanford Soccer has to retreat. PBM not allowed to go back in, and while Breznov, he's clearing out his purple buff. Olympus Bolts, we've been saying it for going on 2 years now. Even back when they were the Renegades, they've been working on this kind of reactive style, this counter-punch style. They hadn't quite hit their pace back in Season 7. I think we're confident enough to say they've got it here in Season 8.
Sanford Soccer dashes out of the pin here and actually catches Haddix with the ultimate. We saw a great ult from Sam earlier on. PandaCat, what are you thinking here, my friend? He thinks he wants to fight Barracuda here. PBM rotating into this fight. Barracuda taking a lot of damage from PandaCat, but it's a stun from Awesome Jake. The wall goes up from PBM. The freeze around the corner. That one's good onto Barra, and the ice should be enough damage here from the Jade Dragon support, and it is, but Awesome Jake now turns it around because, of course, Venenu's rotated over from the mid lane. The Bolts just too quick here this game. PBM with a good wall might secure his escape, but not something we have all that much data on Awesome Jake playing. But apparently, hey, looks good. 9 turns Blessing finds its way onto Hurrywin in the mid lane, but a Disapparate and Beads are going to keep this soul alive. Wow. But PandaCat, he's read out here by the Olympus Bolts. And it's another individual pick. It looks like Awesome Jake trying to drop ship a couple members of the Bolts in range, but nobody from the Jade Dragons will be there to find out.
PandaCat just steps forward trying to defend Hurrywin, wants to get the taunt over the wall and walk out, and just cannot do so.
Free FG now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say free. There is still certainly steal potential. Here? Yeah, definitely contest. This lead that the Bolts have is not so much that the Dragons have to respect this.
PBM uses the wall here and gets his mag eyes popped. Final K will use the ultimate, and the Olympus Bolts turn their eyes towards the big old Cthulhu that's wandering its way on in. The Olympus Bolts waiting out this ultimate, though. This is patient play from the Bolts. Say, all right, Final K, you use your ult. We're going to back away, wait for it to time out, and then maybe engage afterwards.
Yeah, see in 17 seconds. Your time is up. We're turning it around.
Oh, man, he gets knocked up on the backside, and look at the Olympus Bolts. Look at the way they surge back into this fight. Hurrywin uses this Disapparate yet again, has an Aegis, but does not have the beads. Aegis gets used, but all the damage awaits around the corner. Haddix notches his second of the game.
PandaCat does finally respawn, so it's Hurrywin and PandaCat tagging in and out for this team fight. Olympus Bolts gonna go ahead and start up the Fire Giant yet again, and this time, I don't expect to see the Jade Dragon step up. They are too far away. They do not have the resources they need. Breznov, no ultimate. Sanford Soccer and Final K don't have theirs available either. Olympus Bolts priming themselves to maintain their lossless year so far.
I mean, that is Soul Gem Soul Reaver is there, and he has enough damage, he thinks, to build something a little bit defensive on the back end of things. This Baba Yaga alone at 3-0-6 is going to be difficult to kill.
And that's not to mention the buff that she saw to her health shield as PandaCat caught out a little bit here. Can't use the rocket to escape. He'll just get blocked.
He is trying to run away thanks to the dollar transformation there, but enough of the Bolts are here that no chance. And Haddix on a killing spree. The Erlang Shen half defensive, half offensive with the animosity out of the solo lane, swinging for the Olympus Bolts. Lasbro with a 2v1 here. Sam
it's
for
working
soccer against Fine. Okay, he got the stun on the
what?
Sam, and the axe is there, and Lasbro saves his tower, gets the kill as well. And it looks like the Olympus Bolts can do no wrong. It'll be the ultimate used by Awesome Jake as well. Underneath the left side, Phoenix go the Olympus Bolts with Lasbro wasting the time of 2.
Man, Sam for soccer just gets caught out there. That's a tough one. They're looking to end it.
Lasbro delaying out Final K. Final K will make it on back to the fountain, but it's Polar Bear Mike who will have to use the ultimate
50%.
here. The Olympus Bolts take us to a game 3, but this set will come to a close. Turn off the lights, it's all over, and the Olympus Bolts get the win.
And a lot of that stemmed, I think, from that original frontline pressure that Awesome Jake was able to provide with the Horus. Also, a pretty interesting switch up here. Haddock's actually the one on the Erlong Shen, and Lasbra. Osiris jungle has seemed to be the flavor of the past couple of weeks, and for good reason. Lasbra just had so much control, really did not let Sam breathe for even an instant. And without Sam, I think, being able to consistently find those big tonic booms, there wasn't really a whole lot of early to mid-game presence for the Jade Dragons to try and counteract a lot of that early triple warrior front line from the Bolts.
Now, there's an ult we just saw there from Jake that was maybe one of the biggest moments in my mind. There were a lot of good fights from the Dragons. It looked like they were going to win. That ult let them reposition and engage on that fight, and they just come through and clean it up. A little before that, we saw a moment in mid where things looked clean, and of course Lasbra, as you had highlighted, something that he was bringing into the jungle was the Osiris. Not only did it look good, he got to 2v1 at the very end of the game as well, just to showcase he had it. The front line for this team, switching Haddox onto specifically something that maybe wasn't going to do as much damage as what Lasbra put out, but was going to have the setup needed for the team. And
Bolts
everything
are sitting pretty now at the top, but next week, or as the week's conclusion, Jade Dragons versus Olympus Bolts, that was our closure for today. But a very interesting week 3, to say the least. Had a lot of 2-0s, minus that last set, but again, Olympus Bolts sitting pretty here with a 5-0 in that number 1 spot. Camelot Kings, Atlantis Leviathans, they're hot on their heels, however, and same for the Tartarus Titans, as Jade Dragons will likely go back to the drawing board. But you have to remember, Gore, this is definitely feeling a lot more of a tight-knit race than what the standings might allude.